So now that we got these finally assembled and everything put together, we can maybe talk about some of the differences here between the two. Now, to save time in the video, what I did is I spent like the last hour and a half going through and taking all the different measurements of these two to see some of the differences that we have with it. Now, one of the first things I want to get into is the height, because for me, as you remember at the beginning of the video, that was a big deal for me. I had to have the lifting height. So I'm going to jump to that clip right now here for you, and you're going to get to see which one of these actually had the better lifting height. So that test in terms of our lifting height really produced some interesting results that really surprised me. Now, on our 69514, it's spec'd out to lift 100 inches. And when I measure from the boom, not the chain, but the boom itself down to the floor, it's actually 100 inches exactly in terms of its lifting height. So they were just right on the money when they actually spec'd that one out. Now on the 60388, they spec'd this one out at 90 3/4 inches. However, when I put a tape measure on the boom and go down to the floor on this one, I'm getting a whopping 105 inches. So it's actually lifting 14 1/4 inches higher than what they spec'd it out at. That's quite a bit of a monstrous difference that they would get that off there by. So this one here definitely will have a higher lifting height. So that was quite a surprise for me on that. I did not see that coming at all. I figured the 69514 would have it beat, and it turns out that it wasn't. So let's talk about some of the differences between the two in general. Now, right off the bat, it's easy to tell we have a difference in the color. One's the lighter color, one's the darker color. But what I noticed with it is on the darker color, it has more of a sheen to it, more of a gloss. That way, I'm one of those weird people when I'm working and I'm done using it, any grease in that on it, I'm going to clean it and wipe it off. And that's kind of a bigger deal to me because having that high gloss finish, I'm able to wipe off any grease or fingerprints, things of that nature. Where on the brighter silver, it's more like a satin rough finish. So it's kind of a harder time to clean it. Now, once again, I'm probably being real picky, but for me, if I have my choice between the two, I want one that's easier for me to be able to clean it. Now, both of these, I gotta say, I was a bit disappointed with the hardware that came with them. In general, I like the hardware that came with the 69514 better, but both of them included grade 4.8 bolts for like doing the base and the supports on them, as opposed to just sticking with a grade 8 bolt throughout the whole thing, which I found odd for a 2-ton shop crane. Why didn't they just do the grade 8 bolts? So on the one that I'm going to be keeping, I'll be replacing those grade 4s with a grade 8 bolt, so that way I just have the most strength that I can get out of them. Now, the handles are pretty much about the same height. On the 60388, they're maybe an inch taller and about an inch wider, but once again, that's not that big of a deal. Now, on our support straps that come up from the base, on the 69514, they mount up where the handle is, as opposed to the 60388, they mount up on our center column. Once again, no big deal, but that's just one of the differences between the two. I do like the fact that on the 60388 for our pins that lock in the legs, bigger hoop to them, they're easier to grab than what we have on the 69514. However, funny enough, our R clips that plug into it have a bigger tab on the 69514. So there's a little give and take between the two there. Also, on the 60388, it is definitely longer. In fact, the legs that drop down on this one are going to be 58.5 inches long, which gives us an overall length from the very back to the very tip of the front is going to be 68.5 inches. Now on the 69514, the legs are 54 3/4 inches long, which means from the very back to the very tip on the front, it's 65 inches. So there's a 3.5 inch difference between the two. Now, funny enough, the 69514, actually where the legs come out, and I'll show you a shot of that here, has a greater angle as they come out, and as such, what happens is you end up having a wider area in here to slide an engine stand in. Now, with this one here on the very end, the max width here is 35 inches. We're on the 60388, it's 31.5. So we're actually able to get engine stands further down in here. Now, I'm going to put a clip in here now for you where I actually take my engine stand and slide it into these so you can see the difference. Now this one here is longer because the legs are longer on it. So what I've done is lined up the back of the cranes, so that way we'll know how far back to give us a good fair comparison. So as we take this one and we'll bring it in, it comes in a fairly long ways. Now right there it would actually be touching. Now in my opinion, you got quite a bit of difference there that you would be able to get a motor put on there and get that lined up. Now for easy's sake, what I am going to do, I'm just going to grab a little level here and we'll roughly set that right there so it lines up. So that'll give you an idea of how far back it went there on that one. And now we'll go ahead and slide it over here. And if you remember, this one here is wider. At least it was speccing out at that. Let's see how much difference it is. So this one here comes back about 2 inches further back into the framework than it does on the 60388. So you do have some advantages with that wider spread at the base on this one. So total it ends up being about 2 inches in terms of I can slide this one further back on the 69514 than I can the 60388. Once again, that can make a big difference for you. Now, if you have the different kind of engine stand where it's like the T-shape or the I-shape, you should have no problem getting that down, in my opinion, on either one of these if you're at the half-ton or even the 1-ton slot to be able to do that with. Now, both of these in terms of their boom length and that are pretty much going to be about the same. When it's completely extended, I'm not going to get into every single number, you don't need it, but when they're completely extended like they are here now, on the 69514, it's 62¼ inches on the reach, where on the 60388 it's 62¾ so it's got about a ½ inch further reach than we do on this one here. Some other things that we have here in terms of differences between the two is going to be in the storage. Now on the base of the 60388, it's actually 33½ inches wide, where on the 69514 it's 29½ inches. So we're at 4 inches difference there. The depth on both is pretty much going to be the same at 21 inches. So if you're looking to store it, it's going to be about 21 inches deep, 33½ wide, and with the legs folded up, it would actually be 63½ inches tall. So if you're looking to put it under a shelf or something like that, where this one here is going to only be 60 inches tall, that 3½ inch difference once again. So some of the things that I kind of ran into as I did this one is, as I started off, and I'll show you some pictures here as I talk, but the center arm on this one, or our center support, and the boom on this one has been off. The way they welded it here at the base, the way it sits on it, it doesn't sit level. And at one point I even took some levels and put them between the two so I could get an idea of the differences and how they're sitting, and I'll show that here to you now. So now you'll notice as I zoom in here on the 60388, our bubble is touching on the left-hand side. In fact, it's over just a little bit, but not much. But when we go to the top part, you're going to see that bubble is just buried to the right. And so as I zoom out, you'll see, you can just see how it's sitting there crooked as it is right now. Now, when I actually move over to the 69514 here, you'll see our bubble is sitting pretty much perfect. It's barely touching that right line on there. The difference being, though, as I go up top, you're going to see that the bubble is in the same position. This one's sitting straight. And what that does is it really shows how much off the 60388 was compared to the 69514. It's actually doing pretty good. So having the boom off is a big deal. And as you notice when we did that height extension, and I may have kind of put that in here before now, but it really plays when you raise that height up. You really got to be careful with how that motor and your weight is going to shift as you bring it up on there. Now, one of the things I noticed just working with both of these here in my garage is the 69514, I'm able to roll it around easy. I can spin it, move it, it does fine. For whatever reason, this one here, I have to fight it and grab it and push it. It does not roll around as easy as the 69514. Now, another funny thing, and it's just one of those things when you're assembling it, but this one here had tons of little metal slivers that like stuck out everywhere. At least 5 or 6 times I poked my hands putting this thing together and said some bad things I probably shouldn't have, but you know, it just goes to the quality when they go to manufacture it. And you know, that kind of leads me into the instructions and the assembly. Night and day between the two of these. On the 69514 has great clear instructions on it. They actually label all the different fasteners and the washers and everything you need to do, other than they skip the first step, but they both do. But it's easy to figure out which fastener goes where to get this assembled. On the 60388, you get a box of parts. There's nothing in the instructions that say use this bolt to go into here. It just says insert bolt, use the washer and nut. It doesn't give you any ideas. Now, they're on a ton, so you can figure it out eventually, but there's just no direction to it. So it takes much longer to put it together. And there is more things to do on this one in terms of the wheels. You have to put more, the 2 front wheels on where these come mounted. This one just took a lot longer to put together. And as you put it together, in my opinion, especially when they're side by side, you can just really see that there's a big difference in the quality in terms of how these are manufactured between the 60388 and the 69514. In my opinion, and I'm sure you can tell it right now just by the way I've been talking, there's no comparison. I'll keep the 69514. The 60388's got to go. I wouldn't keep this one in any case. The other thing I noticed when I was doing the base on this one is the best way I can put it is like where our legs connect down in here, it's kind of rounded or beveled. I don't know if that was an issue they had with it or something. So when you go to mount the wheels on it, they don't sit flat because the base of that is flat. So you actually have to like bend the mounting plate as you tighten down the fasteners to it. It was really odd with it. And then when you're done, there's quite a bit of a gap between the base and the legs. So they kind of rattle around a lot. Oddly enough, on the 69514, I didn't have that at all. It's squared up, it fit in nicely. And when you're done, the legs fit tightly inside the slots. There isn't a lot of slop in there. It fits nice and snug, so it does a much better job. I've just really been impressed with that. So, you know, in the end, I just don't care for the 60388. The stickers, you can't read the numbers on it. You know, once again, small things, but they all add up as you go through it. It appears to me, and oh, by the way, both of these use the same RAM, same identical RAM on both of these, so there is no difference in there. The chains here on the end, pretty much to me, are identical, so they do use those. It's kind of funny because you can tell these are made in 2 different locations, but I'm sure they get different supplies delivered to them for that. So for me, there's just enough differences that really make it clear to go with the 69514 over the 60388, but you're going to have to decide that for yourself. So this one here is going to go back to the store, and I'm going to show them the pictures of how bad it leans and let them know that, quite frankly, I think it could be a safety hazard. And we're going to move on with the 69514. So here I've done another test with my shop crane here, and I have yet another V8 engine on here, another 5.4 liter. This one happens to be a 3 valve instead of the 2 valve that you saw in our previous video there. But once again, I've had this thing sitting on here for over 24 hours and it has not moved at all. I've done my measurements to it. It's held up perfectly and it's doing great so far. The other thing I may show you here that I've actually done, which has been a huge improvement, was I replaced their factory hook that did not swivel with a new stainless one, and I'll put a link to it down below in the description. But now I have the ability, as I need to, I can move the motor around and do the work I need to on it, and I don't have to worry about having any issues or having to move my equipment. It's so much better having a hook on top that swivels so you can move whatever it is you're lifting with it, in this case a motor. And so now it's been a little bit over a year that I've been using my shop crane, and actually 5 engine rebuilds later, I'm pretty comfortable with giving you some final thoughts on this shop crane. Now, however, before I dive into that, what I'd like to do is stop for a minute and just show you some of the improvements that I made to my shop crane along the way that just help it perform better for what I needed to do. And hopefully some of these tips and ideas will help you as well. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is to top off the hydraulic fluid in your ram here before you start using your crane. Now, as you saw earlier on in the video, it's real quick and easy to do. All you're going to want to do is open your release valve, take off this rubber cap that they have on here. I ran down to my local parts store and picked up some hydraulic fluid like you see here. I'll put a link to something like it down below in the description for you in case you're curious about it. And I put a tube on it, and then I filled it in through this hole until it started to come out through the fill hole. Once I did that, I knew I was done. I left the cap off. I pumped it for about 45 seconds. Once that was done, I put the cap back on, tightened up the release valve, and that did the trick. Now, in the end, I ended up having to add about a quart of hydraulic fluid into my ram to get it full. Now, judging from the size of this, and quite frankly, I don't know what its capacity is, but based on the size, a quart is a pretty extensive amount of oil that this actually needed to have put in it to have it filled up properly. So that is something that could certainly affect the performance of your crane and possibly have it not be able to hold weight over a longer period of time. So make sure you check your fluid first thing. Now, the next thing I improved on my crane is the storage for the pump handle. Now, what it comes with is a hoop that's mounted here on the side, and it just kind of goes in here, and there's a great example. So what happens is they only put one hoop in, and so it kind of wobbles around in there, and it'll kind of stay if you do it straight up and down, but it's going to start chipping away at the paint down on here, and then it starts to rust. But if you set it in at the angle like it is here with that post, it falls out every time. So I didn't want to go through and kind of take off some of the paint and weld a hoop on there so it would sit like it should. What I did is I came up with something different. So I picked up one of these 18-inch magnetic tool holders from Harbor Freight, and then it also has 2 number 2 conduit hangers, as well as a 1-inch PVC pipe with a 1-inch cap. And then I put a little foam like from a pipe insulator down there in the bottom, and how this works is now my pump handle just slides down in there like that. Now, the cool thing is now you can either store it here on the side like this, or what I like to do is I actually just take it and store it on the back side of the post here like that, and then I can take my handle and drop it down in there, and I have easy access to it while I'm working. The third improvement I made to my crane was actually down here in the release valve for the ram. Now, how you normally open that and close that is here with your pump handle on the end. It has some grooves cut out in there that you'll kind of put over those pins, and you've done that. You kind of twist it left or right to open and close that release valve. Well, the problem you get with that is it's hard to be precise with it, and one of the things definitely in the last year I've learned doing all these overhauls is sometimes you just need to drop that motor an 1/8 of an inch to get things to line up just right, and so you just need just a little bit. You need precision. And the problem I run into with using the pump handle is a lot of times it's just too sloppy, and all of a sudden it drops a 1/2 inch and you're off, and it causes a problem. So what I did is I hopped over on Fusion 360 and I designed this knob, and it's even got grooves on it and everything that fits over this little knob that sticks out here, this post on the release valve. And what that does is now, instead of using the pump handle, I have a nice big handle here. It's grooved so I can grip it easy, and I can open and close that with precision so I can drop just small amounts if I need to. Plus it's easier, and I can keep my pump handle where it belongs while I'm working. I can do both kind of at the same time. Sometimes you have to do that. Now I've set up an account over on Thingiverse. I'll put a link to it down below in the description for free. You can go over there, download this file, print one off for yourself. I definitely recommend doing this for your shop crane. Now the fourth thing I did to my shop crane was I picked up 4 of these little strips. They're like a safety tread or a step tread, if you will. They're rubber. They have like a diamond plate finish on them. I got these over at Harbor Freight, but what I did is I bought these and I placed them on the inside of these drop legs where my engine stand comes in contact here. And basically what I wanted to do is protect the paint in here from getting chipped every time I slide my engine stand in there. Once again, to prevent rust and have issues with it. And so now when I slide my engine stand in, it hits up against that rubber and it doesn't damage the paint. Now while I was at it, what I did is I also cut some and placed them across the back here, because a lot of times when I'm working, I'm stepping on that back, you know, you're looking up over the hood or something down in there to see what's going on. And it's nice to have that safety step on there with some tread in case you have some oil or something on your feet. You're not going to slide off of it and fall and hurt yourself. It just gives you some extra traction, and it protects the paint on it as well. So now my last improvement is my most favorite that I did actually, and it was a big game changer for this shop crane, and that relates to the hook and chain that come with it. Now this here is the one that comes stock with it, and it's a heavy duty hook, but the problem is it doesn't swivel. So you can maybe get about a 90-degree turn, maybe a little bit past that before the chain binds, and you've pretty much hit the limit to how far you can turn things. And then at that, when you do that, whatever you're working with is wanting to twist back. So what I did is I went over to Amazon and I picked up this stainless swivel hook here that has a full 360-degree rotation. So now when I take something out, I can spin it around as much as I need to get it to line up with whatever I want. Now the weight limit on this one is 1,000 kilograms or 2,200 pounds. So you're limited as to what you're going to be able to lift with it. But for the V8 motors I was working with, this was more than sufficient. But it was a real big game changer. What you run into as you're working with one of these is when you take the motor out, it's facing your crane here. But you need to have the motor backwards in order for it to mount on to your engine stand. The problem you run into is if you can only rotate it with the stock chain 90 degrees, it doesn't line up with your engine stand. So by having the 360-degree swivel, I can take it out of the vehicle, I can spin it around, drop it right down on the engine stand. You saw that earlier on in the video. So I highly recommend doing this upgrade. I'll put a link to it down below. This one here is a game changer. You're going to like it. Well, I hope the improvements I made to my shop crane will help give you some ideas on things to do to yours and make yours work better even for you as well. So, you know, on final thoughts with my shop crane, I gotta say I really like this thing. It has done great for me over the last year. Like I said, I've done 5 big motor projects. I've done some other things I've used this with. I bought a big air compressor. I used this to lift it up out of the truck and set it down in my garage. It's just done great on everything that I've needed it to do. The paint's held up really good on this particular model. It's easy to clean it and wipe it down, and I like to just keep my things looking nice here in the garage. It moves nicely even with an engine on it. I don't have a problem moving it around in my garage, even with the expansion joints and that in the floor. It rotates nicely, it moves easily. That's really good. It's nice that it folds up and takes a small footprint because my garage is getting overpopulated as it is, and so it's nice I can kind of put it off into the corner and it doesn't take up a lot of space. All in all, everything's worked great on it. I've done at least 4 rear main seals that I've had a V8 motor sitting on it overnight so that the sealant can dry, and in not one of those times did the height drop down on it at all. It held firm, it did great, and I never had any issue with it whatsoever. So the reach is good, it did good for our truck. my son's truck, which is the first one you saw in there, you know, we had to get it up pretty high to get it up over the front of the bumper there and get it out, and everything worked great with that. This one here was really stable. At no time did I ever feel unsafe with it, maybe falling over or something. It just did really well, and especially for the price point, this is one I really recommend you taking a look at, and also look into doing some of the improvements I showed you to do here as well. So I hope this information in this video has been helpful for you. If it has, please do me a favor and hit that like button for me. It just lets YouTube know that y'all appreciate my content. Now, if you'd like to see more videos like this one in the future, why don't you hit the subscribe button and stick around with me here in the garage. As always, I appreciate you stopping by, and thanks for watching.